Okay, two dashboards that I'll quickly cover here based on exported data from the Reporting Daily database that we reviewed earlier. So we'll look at the trigger dashboards for retention. We've also created an acquisition triggers dashboard since it's very similar in structure, obviously, to the retention. So the files that get output from the Reporting Daily Microsoft Access database get output as CSV text files in our C drive email underscore reporting folder once again. So again, that's why we need that folder. So this is a consistent location for that to output. Again, that could be changed if that gets worked out to a different location. You would just need to change the export setup and specs that are in the Reporting Daily database. So we've got those two files here. Now we don't even have to be concerned about the name, because if we go to the dashboards, these are set up in a subfolder, but they could be set up anywhere as long as they maintain this name. So we do have to have the actual file name. And so with the retention triggers dashboard, if we open that, once it's complete for a quarter, it can be renamed to something else, adding the quarter name. But in order for the macros to run correctly in this, you need to have the actual generic name, retention triggers dashboard. So there's just one macro to run, which is update the retention triggers, and it will find that CSV file without having to copy it in this case, or locate it. So we can just run that. We get our usual generic warning that you're about to run this macro. So we'll do a Y to continue, and it will just go ahead and run part of that, formatting the data, adding formulas to calculate some of the email metrics. At the midway point, it reaches what's the latest week of the quarter that you want to show on the dashboard. In this case, I think we have only complete data through week 3, so I'll make it week 3 for now. Enter in that number, and you can see it's updating. There's a dozen different pivot tables here, which it will update correctly. It will expand as we go. So when if we made that week 4, it would add on a column or unhide a column for week 4, and so on through the end of the quarter. So that's just processing and refreshing all the different pivot tables. So it takes roughly 30 seconds to a minute or so to run and update. And then also, I should mention that the MMM dashboard, which is based on the same triggers data, is also updated. And it'll give you a final retention triggers dashboard updated. So we can look at the triggers data here. Now again, if there seems to be anything off, if anything goes askew, if numbers seem incorrect based on that, you, of course, first of all, these are all individual pivot tables, so by clicking the pivot table tools and unhiding the field list, we can look at what we can alter any of these things, any of the calculations. Here's the gross orders. We've got all the selections here, so any of this can, in theory, be changed based on that data. The underlying data and these of course are all based on the same data set, so it's just a convenience factor to have the selections already made in each individual pivot table. You could run this with one single pivot table. You would just have to update it to display all the different calculated values that you wanted. Triggers data is all going to be stored here, so again, if anything seems off, if there's a trigger that's completely missing, well, you would know. You could take a look to see if it's even appearing in the data that the pivot table is based on here. And this is all the one unique aspect of triggers compared to a blast, is that it's calculating at the week level. We're assuming that a sale in a particular week is going to be tied to a launch in a particular week. That's kind of the best way we have of doing that. And all the calculated values, which was part of that macro, get calculated in these columns so that they're incorporated into those pivot tables. The same setup pretty much is for the acquisition dashboard or triggers dashboard. You can run the same process. It will be drawing on acquisition triggers data as opposed to the retention triggers data, different CSV file. but as far as all the other structural elements, those should be part of it. So if there's a trigger, again, that gets named differently and you want it to get named, well, that all ties back to how it was designated in the cell matrix that you set up in your campaign table daily. So if you want to name something a trigger differently, which I think I mentioned earlier, as it appears here, if we wanted to call this something else, then it would have to be added as something else. I think a recent example of that might be the split in day zero between online and retail. Well, I had to alter the cell matrix so that it would the different segments and omniture tags that make up the online versus the retail, they were named in the trigger column correctly so that they would appear here correctly.